Hello to everybody listening to the WMA podcast. My name is Jake Kane, and as a guest today, we have Kevin Nowakowski. He was a graduate of Michigan State and currently works for UBS while holding the CFP designation. This episode, we will talk about his experience at UBS, how advisor teams differ from one another, as well as how psychology plays a role in different client decision-making, and much more. Hope you guys enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WMA podcast. Today, we have Kevin Nowakowski from UBS here with us today. So, Kevin, could you start off by telling a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, again, Kevin Nowakowski with UBS. I'm actually part of a three-person team at UBS, and I've been in the financial services business for a little over 25 years. And certainly seen a lot of changes throughout the the time I've been here at UBS. And actually, it didn't start as UBS when I first started here. It was actually a firm that you may or may not have heard of, Payne Weber. And when I started with Payne Weber, the business was considerably different. I actually interned here for a number of years and cold called for an advisor that used to be here that specialized in retirement plans, and that's kind of how I ended up, at this office specifically, and at the firm. Is when I was in college, I started at Michigan State as a general business major. Had no idea what I wanted to do, no inkling of going into financial services at all. And kind of stumbled into, working as an intern here. I was actually normally working at a golf course in the summertime in my off school time, and ended up getting hurt and couldn't do that job. And at that time, my father had just started a few years earlier at Payne Weber, and again, another advisor here needed a cold caller. So interviewed, got the position, and worked here for the summer for that team, and started to gain a little bit of an interest in the financial services business. And that specific team actually didn't need a cold caller the next summer or over winter break, but I'd met with the branch manager a few times, and they asked me to come on board and just be kind of I don't want to say a gopher, but pretty much did anything that was needed in the office at that time. Everything from worked as the receptionist to the cashier, to filling in for sales assistants when they were out, to if you can believe it, hand posting of trades, because back then we actually hand posted them. So it was a lot different than today. And the one thing I would say I did that the advisors in the office were really good with me about doing is I asked a lot of questions and learned a lot about different businesses and different ways of working with clients. There are, I'd say, essentially 25 or 30 different teams in our office currently, and everyone has their own model. Everyone has their own way of working with clients. And back then, the one thing that I did is I just asked a lot of questions. And like I said, they were very open about, educating me and kind of letting me know how they work with clients. And I kind of absorbed what I like about each team. And when I went back to Michigan State, kind of geared towards the finance, as a major. And, once I came out of Michigan State, applied and actually came back to the same office. And at that time, my father's partner of a number of years was retiring. So I kind of was fortunate enough to come in, and that's obviously rare in this business, but it's kind of how I started.
I appreciate you sharing that. So kind of going back to one of your points about having 25 to 30 teams in the UBS office, Could you kind of speak on how UBS differs from other companies, and maybe more specifically how the different UBS teams in the same office differ from one another?
Sure. So UBS as a firm, there are certainly a number of other firms that I would say are on the same level as them, as I would call it, the major firms like the Merrill Lynch's, the Morgan Stanley's, the Goldman Sachs of the world, where I would view them as, again, full service. And by full service, I mean providing everything from, the typical individual stocks, bonds, mutual funds, things like that, to individual money managers, insurance, lending. I mean, our team actually does quite a bit of lending. I mean, we have the ability of doing mortgages. I mean, the business has completely changed from when I initially got in the mid to late 90s. I mean, back then it was much more geared towards individual transactions, individual stocks, bonds, different things like that. But UBS as a whole, what we like about them, my team, is we like the fact that they do give us latitude to work with our clients in the way that we see fit. What they provide for us is the tools to do that. For example, if I had a call this morning actually with our one of our bankers, and our team does quite a bit of securities-based lending, where it's not more, or I'm sorry, it's not lending for purposes of buying securities, but it's lending for purposes of, hey, I'm doing a real estate investment, or hey, I need a bridge loan because I'm selling my house and I don't have the cash on the sidelines to buy the new one. And in today's market, I need to be a cash buyer. Even things from, hey, I found another investment that I want to get into. Again, a lot of real estate investments, but that's again where we have those experts on staff that, literally I'll call them and say, okay, here's my issue. How do I best solve it? And they will go, and that's their job, is to come up with the best solution there. So having that is a very big advantage for us because every situation is different. And that's the one thing that our team does, is we have customized solutions for our clients. I mean, it's not a cookie cutter approach by any means. I mean, we certainly have our favorite investments, our favorite mutual funds, for example, that we use. But again, what it comes down to is, what are the client's needs? How do we best meet those needs? And again, that's where UBS is very good in providing us those resources. I mean, years ago, we used to do a tremendous amount of individual bonds. I mean, we had a lot of clients who wanted that service. I mean, over the years, since interest rates have gone considerably lower, that business has certainly gone less, but we still have our clients that only buy individual bonds, and our bond desk is used quite often. So that's kind of how UBS works with us, and how we have that as kind of our backdrop, so to speak. I think you had asked about the individual teams. Was that the next part of the question?
Yep.
Okay, so again, the unique thing about this office, which I think a lot of people aren't aware of when you look at some of the larger firms like UBS, is it's almost as if you have 20 or 30 different businesses within that office, or within that particular company. I mean, our team is definitely more of what I would call wealth management, wealth planning, where I mean, I'm a certified financial planner. My father came from the banking business, where he had done plans his whole career. So our general way of working with clients is to start with a plan and build off that plan and solve it through those different investments. There are other advisors in this office that could be a specialist in 401ks, in those types of plans, and they work with individual companies to do that. There are advisors in this office who do some fairly complex trading strategies with options. I mean, whenever I have a question about an option, if a client asked about one, I literally go down in the office and ask one of the experts, because that's all they do. And I mean, there's no way you can be an expert in everything. That's why it's, again, nice having those resources there. Is we're very good at what we do, but again, if we get out of our specialty, is where that's where UBS and even other advisors in this office, again, they're a good resource, and vice versa. I mean, I've had clients, or I'm sorry, other advisors come to me and say, can you explain what's going on with this particular municipal bond strategy? And so, again, definitely is very helpful from that standpoint. But it's also good from the standpoint of, every client has a specific style. I mean, there are clients that we do business with that, again, other advisors, it wouldn't fit their particular investment style, and vice versa. If I get excuse me, a referral from someone and they say, hey, we're looking for, option strategies and want to be extremely aggressive, I'm gonna say, you know what, I'm sorry, it's not for me, but I can recommend an advisor, here that fits better. And again, I've had the same situation where another advisor will say, hey, this is not really in my particular realm of how we do business. Maybe they want to work with you. And so again, that's, I would say, the nice thing about that is UBS does allow us the latitude to really solve our client problems, and our clients help accomplish their goals and objectives on our own, and again, customize it in the way that we see fit.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. So kind of going from your personal experience with your specialty or your style, can you kind of explain how you found that, why you enjoy it, and maybe some things that people seeking a wealth management career, things they should do to find their specialty?
Sure. So the way that we kind of moved towards the way we do business now is, again, as I mentioned, my father was always kind of in the planning side of the business at the bank, and when he moved over to Payne Weber at that time, continued that that focus on planning, but it wasn't as strict as what we do now. I mean, again, back then, and late 90s, it was a lot of individual stock trading. It was certainly geared towards accomplishing a goal, but it was a completely different way of getting there. And fast forward over the years, the one thing that we've kind of discovered along the way and have really honed in on is we find it more enjoyable, and certainly have seen more success with our clients by literally sitting down with them. And this is where the whole CFP comes in, is sitting down with them and saying, okay, what are your goals and objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? What type of risk are you comfortable with? And if there's one thing that I learned during 08, 09, when it was a really challenging time in the in the economy and in the markets and in the business in general, was a lot of people's definition of risk is considerably different when things are going down. And that is definitely where planning really comes into play. And I would say one thing that, when I first got in the business, there was some encouragement behind the scenes. Hey, you may want to look at a CFP. And it was there, but it wasn't really one of those things that they made a big push on. And probably 10 years into my careers, when they said, hey, this is the way the business is going. And we could see it. You could see the writing on the wall. It was not, buy, sell stocks. That was in my opinion, that was a dying business. So we kind of adjusted and said, hey, we've always done a little bit of planning, but let's make it a very big push and a focus. And so I decided to, kind of go to night school for a couple of years, do the CFP, take that and really make a push. And UBS was kind of doing the same thing, is giving us, the capabilities online to do those plans. And fast forward to today, when we sit down with a prospect, first thing we do is, hey, let's establish a plan. Let's see what we're trying to accomplish here and not shoot from the hip. And it makes it a more successful relationship over time, and it keeps people on focus. And it definitely is very important during volatile times. During 08, 09, when it was a very difficult time, having those plans on the books, we could sit back with a client and say, hey, I know it's tough. We're going through it together with you, but let's look at our plan. We are coming out of this, and for the most part, it kept people, engaged, but it also kept them going with the plan. And at the end of the day, years later, they were substantially ahead of the people who had sold out in panic and went to the sidelines. And so that was certainly a kind of a reason that, reinforced staying with those plans. And, to this day, I would say I get referrals from clients, and literally I'll get a call and someone will say, hey, John, referred me. He really likes the servicing. He really likes what you've done, but I want a plan like he does. I don't know what I'm doing. I've got investments, but I really don't have a plan. So literally my clients are kind of some of my best salespeople. Is they will literally, over, whether a dinner with some friends or something, say, hey, yeah, here's who I'm working with. And yeah, it's not just investments. We've got a plan. I mean, it's college planning, it's retirement planning. It's hey, I've got a senior parent that we're working, trying to get them into assisted living. I mean, we have some of those resources to help out. So again, it's more of a holistic approach. And again, I think that's what we do best at least our team.
Absolutely. So kind of just a second part of that question, could you kind of talk about the psychology that plays a role in these clients? And, you just mentioned clients are some of your best salespeople, and obviously, they want to do things their way, but you're the expert. So, how would you kind of talk them out of, pulling out their assets in a time of, 2008 or COVID? How does psychology play a role with the clients?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I would say one of the biggest things that we do is when we work with our clients is we educate them. And yeah, I can't tell you the number of clients who I've had, after a couple years will say, I'll call them and do our normal review. We do quarterly reviews with our clients, and I call it a financial checkup. I say, you go see your doctor a couple times a year. You're going to talk to your financial advisor a couple times a year. At the very least, we're going to tell you what's going on. And excuse me, during that review, one of the things that I do is I always, kind of give them a top-down, real quick review of, hey, here's what's going on in the economy. Here's what's going on in the markets. Because most people, while they have a little bit of attention on that, what's going on, they really don't know the ins and outs. But so one of the things that we do is we try to educate them. And, we've run into, I've had a number of clients whose spouses were the primary, person who was the finance person, so to speak, in the family. And when that person passes away or they get a divorce, the surviving spouse is kind of left thinking, what do I do here? And again, once I educate them, and I've had literally, surviving husbands and wives say, when I call up and talk about the market, they'll say, oh yeah, I remember that you had mentioned this last time, and I really like the fact that you explain things before, we walk through just the investment returns. And the reason that's important is, in my opinion, the more educated someone is, the calmer they are during volatile times. And we saw that, and COVID's probably the biggest example, because we had massive sell-offs in the beginning of COVID. And one thing that I would say that we do religiously is when times are difficult, and I will say this is kind of a word of advice to anyone thinking about the business, when times are toughest is when you make the most phone calls. Call as many people as you can, talk to them, because even though it's crazy to think, a lot of advisors don't do that. And the successful ones are the ones who make that call. I mean, I always tell a client, when the market's down 500 points or 1,000 points and I'm calling, you know what? At least I'm going to tell you what's going on, and I'm going to give you my opinion. And that's all people want. And the last thing they want is no contact. And because at that time, one of our jobs is to make sure they stay on course, make sure they stay in the plan. Take the emotion out of it, because it's really easy to get emotional when you're talking about someone's life savings. They've worked a lifetime to do it. When it drops a considerable amount in a short period of time, unless you know what's going on and you can rationalize, hey, I'm going to be okay, it's pretty tough. And again, one thing we take pride in is literally when COVID hit, I mean, I was making calls all hours of the day. I mean, there were calls when I would call people 7, 8 o'clock at night, and they'd say, "You're still working?" Yeah, because we need to be these times. And again, it solidifies a relationship, but also that's what people need. They need handholding. I mean, again, we're not the expert in everything, but when it comes to this, is where we can really help someone stay on course. And again, that's where education, I think, is a big part of it. And I always joke with some of my clients, my best instructors at Michigan State were the ones who could put complex things into English. We can all talk above someone else with investment ease, as I call it, but if I can put it in English and they can understand it, they're going to stay as a client. And that's, again, the most important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great points. Definitely agree, about the emotion and obviously scary times, but they do need the hand holding. Definitely. I think everyone does in times like that. So kind of shifting gears, but not different audience this time. What advice would you give to the people at state or, younger individuals when it comes to, setting up their investments or building their own plan or following the markets? What'd be the best piece of advice that you'd offer?
Sure. So from an investment standpoint, and I certainly have a lot of clients who will ask me, hey, my kids are either in college and they're working and they've finally saved some money, or they're just getting out of college and they want to invest some dollars. And in today's day and age, everyone looks on their phone and it's everywhere. I mean, it's last year with the meme stocks, with the AMCs and the like, GameStops. I got a lot of calls from people. Hey, my son or daughter wants to get involved and wants to invest. How would you do it? And I would say the first thing I do is say, okay, try to, but it's very difficult. Ignore the crazy ones. Everyone wants to get in on the positions that are going to make $1 million overnight, and that's great if you've got, as I call it, gambling money. But if you're truly trying to get someone to invest and start to build a portfolio for longer term, saving for a house when you graduate, saving for a house, if you're married, or again, when you're just starting out, build a core of. I'm a big proponent of mutual funds and ETFs. I mean, I gotta tell you, I've got one individual stock. It's UBS. I mean, everything else is funds. And whether right or wrong, that's just my style with my money. And I mean, I have clients who very much want individual stocks, and we can certainly provide that for them. But to start out, I always like, hey, we can get into some index funds and get some very nice exposure to the market and dip our toes in. And then subsequently, if you want to get more aggressive, hey, let's look at, I mean, there's enough ETFs and funds out there that are very aggressive that if you want that style, it's certainly available to you. From the standpoint of, educating yourself about the markets, I'm not a big, and probably one of the only guests on your show, I'm not a big book guy. To say I kind of got sick of books after the CFP in night school. Yeah. So
Definitely
I,
fair.
yeah, I definitely got to a point where I was, okay, I'm done. But the one thing I do religiously is I listen to podcasts like crazy. I read a ton of research. I read the Wall Street Journal. I read as many publications as I get my hands on. I just don't want the 30-page article. I don't want the 30-page report. I need the Cliff Notes version. because there's so much information out there that, again, I could read a book, but I feel, for me at least, that, the podcast, I mean, when I'm walking the dog in the morning, I'm listening to a podcast. On the way home from work, I'm listening to a podcast. When I get up, if I'm on the bike or the elliptical, I'm listening to a podcast. And in my opinion, for me at least, that's a better use of my time, and I absorb a lot more. And I know we had talked briefly off the podcast about what podcasts we like, and I like some of the basic ones. Just the Wall Street Journal has one every morning. What's news? They have a Wall Street Journal, Your Money Briefing, and the nice thing is they're in English. They're not talking over your head. Bloomberg has one called Bloomberg Surveillance that I listen to fairly often. It's a longer, more drawn out, and in some cases a little bit investment ease, but they have some very good guest speakers on there. And again, if I like the topic, I'll listen to the whole thing. Other one I would say is UBS has one called UBS On Air called Market Moves. I listen to that every day. So again, find one that is, that you have an interest in, that gives you, whether it's general market information, economics. I'm a big economics guy. Really like listening to the ins and outs of that. And again, from a reading standpoint, this goes back a number of years, but when I was in training, one thing they did is they actually taught us how to read the Wall Street Journal in a Cliff Notes version. It sounds weird, but it's a very simplistic way of doing it. So, if you look at the front page of Wall Street Journal, on the left side, you've got a column called Business and Finance. And that gives you, right down the left side of the column, all of your, Cliff Notes versions of the stories that, if you have an interest, dive into, typically on the Business and Finance section. But it's a great way to start the morning if you're running and you don't have a ton of time, to get a real Cliff Notes version of what's going on. Some of the top stories that may be talked about. And again, later in the day, you say, hey, I had an interest in that article. I'm going to go back to it then. But instead of having to spend 45 minutes in the morning to reading it, which, again, I'm kind of limited on my time in the mornings, it gives me enough information to work with. But again, if I find an article that might be pertinent to one of my clients' holdings, or us in general, some of our strategies, I'm going to read it. But I don't have to read the whole paper. And again, it's condensing it into a short-term type of thing that makes it a little bit easier for me to digest. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, you answered my next question. I was going to ask you how you'd recommend the students to read the Wall Street Journal, because at State right now, that's something that these finance kids are getting exposed to, and definitely important thing to start off your morning with. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that.
Sure.
So just real quick, as it, pertains to, the investing, the doing the research, the reading, the listening to podcasts, what would be the thing that you'd recommend for us to do or to act on, the research that we've done, maybe with our own finances, maybe with, our family? I know that's a broad question, but what do we do after research?
So after the research, I would say, if you're starting out from an investment standpoint, excuse me, is, one of the things, again, I'm a big proponent of is, let's look at keeping the costs to a minimum, and, buying, into strategies or into, finance, companies like Vanguard, Fidelity. The reason I'm a big fan of those is they're low cost and they're not flashy in many situations. I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel here. I just want to get exposure to the market. I want to get, if I have an interest in, technology stocks, obviously it's a big area of interest. Most of those bigger name companies like the, again, the Vanguards, the Fidelities, even BlackRock on the ETF side, I can go with one of those where I have a comfort level. That's a big company backing it. This is not a money manager that has one or two investments that they represent. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have, using one or two investment managers. I mean, everyone's got their specialty and everyone starts somewhere. But I would say to start out with, one thing I've seen success when I first started was staying with the big money managers. And I kind of joke, I don't want to be surprised on Monday morning that there's a problem with the fund. And you're usually not going to run into that with those bigger managers. But also, at the end of the day, if the costs are low, you keep more of your money. And, hey, you can put two funds next to each other, and if they have the same holdings, but one has a higher fee, at the end of the day, the lower cost one's going to win. And so again, staying with those types of money managers to start out with are certainly a very appropriate way to start, in my opinion.
Definitely, I appreciate that. Yeah, I am a personally an owner of ETFs and mutual funds as well. I love them. And back to your point of just getting that exposure to the overall market, I think is a great point, and everyone should definitely keep in mind. So last thing, just to wrap up here, is there any other advice that you'd offer to students pursuing a career in wealth management or students looking to invest? What advice would you give them today?
To get into the business, I would say, again, absorb as much information, on the finance side as you can. I mean, again, there's not one best course to get into this business. Again, like I mentioned, it's not everyone is going the route that I went. I mean, I was kind of a unique route. I've had a lot of coworkers come from the banks, come from even money manager firms like Vanguard, where they started there and moved their way in. And again, everyone has their unique route into there, but certainly educating yourself on just in general as much as you can from a finance standpoint. And I know, I mean, from just reading about the options available at Michigan State, it's considerably different when I was there. I mean, it was more finance driven, and now it's, I mean, from my understanding, is you can actually take as a minor wealth management and actually be prepared to sit for the CFP when you graduate. I think it's fantastic, and that's a very big advantage that you have over a lot of other competitors trying to get into the business as well. So definitely, read as much. And at the end of the day, it is a personal business. I mean, when my biggest nervousness when I first came into business was how am I going to talk to, potential investors or potential clients. I'm a 21-year-old kid coming out of college. And, the one thing is, just keep talking to people. I mean, keep at it. I mean, the one thing that I learned is, they're not so much looking at your age if you know how know what you're talking about. And at the end, again, with the education you're coming out with the training you hopefully get when you eventually do get into the business, and if possible, if you can team up or at least try to work with an older advisor who's been in the business where they can transfer some of that experience. That was one thing that was a big advantage for me is, again, my dad was in the business for quite a number of years, and just sitting in and hearing him make presentations, sitting with him to meet with clients and just absorbing how to, smoothly talk to people. I mean, it's that's a big part of it. I mean, when I first got out of college, there were, speakers that used to come into the Detroit area and talk about how to make presentations, to potential clients, and I used to, join up for those and just go just to listen. I mean, it may not have been even a topic related to finance, but it was maybe a way that I didn't know or hadn't thought of how to relate to a person. So, again, absorbing as much information, then what you'll naturally do is take a piece that works for you. And again, that's kind of how I did it over the years. And like I said, I look back now and it's 25 plus years later, and it's now when I sit down with a potential client or a referral, it's easy. Whereas it was a lot more nervousness when I first started out, I tell you that.
Absolutely. Mr. Nowakowski, I appreciate, your time today and all your advice for the undergrads and myself. And, I really appreciate you coming on and I enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If you like what you just heard, please like, comment, and share. This is Lance Mullen, producer of the MSU WMA podcast. MSU WMA, or Michigan State University Wealth Management Association, is a student organization part of the Eli Broad College of Business, located in East Lansing, Michigan. Our mission is to inspire and educate the next generation of financial planners. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed, please check out our channel on all platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And check out our social media at MSUWMA and MSUWMA.com.